This is One on One. We are, in fact, at the NJEA Convention, the 165th NJEA Convention. We're here with the keynote speaker. We're honored to be joined by Jacqueline Woodson, New York Times Bestselling Author. And as I said, the keynote speaker here, your 2014 novel, 2014 book, if you will, Brown Girl Dreaming, is much of the reason why you are here today. You are not just a great author, you are someone who was nationally recognized recently by the Library of Congress. The actual title as an ambassador is?
National Ambassador for Young People's Literature.
Which means?
That I'm the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, and I get to go around the country and basically preach the gospel of reading and writing, and get people to connect around literature, get people to really think about the impact that books have on their lives, on our lives, and have conversations. My platform is reading equals hope times change, because I believe
Say it again, reading
equals hope times change. It's a mathematical equation, but it's not. It's a
beautiful
reading equation. Thank you. And I think that reading changes us. I think reading gives us hope. I think we read to find that hope, and I think the conversations we have when we read and after we read are really important to a bigger dialogue.
You know, I've mentioned this before. Our daughter, Olivia, happens to be 8 and loves to read, but I see she's distracted, along with millions of other kids, by the iPad that I try to tell her she's so fortunate to even have. Technology and reading. Is there a conflict there?
You know, I think it's still content, right? People are still accessing content. They're still having to read to get to their different things on their devices. I think, you know, when you look at ebooks, when you look at the way young people read by listening to books on their phones, so audio books, right? They're still engaging in literature. It's in a different way. I mean, I think, yeah, we do have a lot more quote unquote distractions, but I think the heart of being able to come to a story, and in these days, there are different ways of coming to it. It's not just the actual book, which is what I love because I'm old school. But kids are still coming to stories. Kids are still really appreciating story. They still love to be read to. And maybe it seems to us like they're reading less. I don't think they are. My kids, you know, have their devices and they have their library, they have their books, and I feel like I see them going back and forth between
They're not mutually exclusive.
Yeah, exactly.
Reading for you as a kid, when did you know that you loved reading?
I always loved reading. I mean, I grew up in a very literary family.
Where?
I grew up in Brooklyn. And my mom, you know, we had library cards. We went to the library every day after school. You know, it was always something. The religion we grew up in was text-based, so there was a lot of reading. But I was a really slow reader. You know, I read differently than a lot of kids read. And I think people didn't understand that, right? that okay, here's a lover of reading, but why is she reading so slowly? And why is she, quote unquote, struggling with reading? Looking back on it, I wasn't struggling. I was reading like a writer. You know, I was reading slowly.
Reading like a writer.
Yeah, I was.
Can you explain that to those of us who've never written a novel or a memoir?
But who have to be tested on reading, right? So you have reading comprehension. You did the standardized test, and there's a way in which you have to read deeply, and you have to get a deeper understanding to be a writer, right? You have to understand how the author makes you feel a certain way. When you have a setting, it's like, how did I just get into this room, right? How do I know how this room smells? And it's a really deep, slow gathering of information from the narrative, and that's how I was reading as a young person. I didn't know that was reading like a writer. I didn't know I was reading as a deeply engaged reader. I thought I was just reading not as fast as other young people. And I think it's one of the really important things I've learned as ambassador, as a writer, is when teachers tell kids they have to read faster. It's like, no, it took me 4 years to write that book. Read it slowly.
Take your time.
Yeah, and really engage in the narrative. And I think it does make a difference in how we understand.
You know, the topics that you write about, you have covered a whole range of complex, difficult, but incredibly important issues in society. You just, at any point you say, you know what, maybe I won't take this on? You just took it on.
Yeah.
Because?
I write realistic fiction, and I think I would be lying to society. I think I'd be lying to the people who the narrative is important to. I think I'd be lying to myself to try to create this kind of homogenous society where all of these different ways of being don't exist. And I write about what's important. I write about what was missing in my own childhood reading. I write about stuff that I know young people need to hear about. I mean, I write about incarceration. We live in a country that's dealing with mass incarceration, that's dealing with the school to prison pipeline, that's dealing with all these young kids, all these young people who know someone who's incarcerated and don't have a book that they can go to and say, wow, this kid is like me. You know, I'm not the only one like this.
Or what about prisoners reentering society and not being prepared to do that, which
Exactly.
is a massive issue?
It's a huge issue. I write about that. I mean, in Harbor Me, the girl's dad has just gotten out of a long incarceration, and it's like, who am I? Where am I? Technology has changed. You know, the world has changed while I was gone away. And I always say I write because I have questions, not because I have answers, right? But I think what literature allows us to do is ask those questions and begin to think about those questions on a grander scale.
You love writing.
I love writing.
And that curiosity that you just talked about, you're curious about just about everything in society.
Yeah, I am. I can't imagine not that. Aren't you?
I am, and it's one of the reasons why this job is a blessing, is a gift. And what I'm interested in is how much of your curiosity, in fact, comes from the reading you did as a kid. Not that there's a quantitative way to measure that, but I've got to believe that you're more curious because of that passion.
I mean, I think it's a good point because you learn about other people through reading, which makes you more curious. I think it also came from, you know, I was born in Ohio. I moved to South Carolina. From South Carolina, I moved to New York City. You know, my family was Jehovah's Witness and Muslim. I think, you know, my family is also interracial. Like, I think there are a lot of ways in which I was constantly like, and this, and what about this? And wow, look at that. And not taking anything as a, quote, norm, right? So I think curious people don't. They, instead of saying this is how it is,
you're open to different views of the world, which is atypical for lots of folks who believe what they believe and read things that reinforce what they believe and don't bring me anything that may challenge what I believe.
That.
Well,
I've never understood that. So.
Same here, and it's scary. I don't mean to get into the whole thing about political discourse, but I will say when people refuse to or are unable to read or be exposed to anything else besides what they think they believe, they're just going to keep believing that and not even challenge it. That's not you.
No. I think there's always room to learn and listen and grow. And even for the people I deeply disagree with, right? I need to understand what they're believing and thinking about, so I have a way of examining it and questioning it and understanding it.
Or even why they think that.
Yeah. And I think once I understand, like I think about someone who's really cruel, right? Or really a bully. And it's like, oh, this person probably got bullied in their life. This person's probably deeply insecure, and that insecurity complex is manifesting as a superiority complex. Like, but it is that constant, not intellectualizing, but asking the bigger questions.
And you also write about bullying.
I do.
I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. I know the keynote presentation is a big deal. That's a big deal, right?
It's fun. I mean, there was a great audience, so it's I don't know, a big deal in terms of.
It's significant because people were looking forward to hearing you, and the folks watching on public broadcasting appreciate listening to you as well, and you honor us by joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me here.
Our pleasure.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. This special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato is brought to you from the Tisch WNET studios at Lincoln Center. Funding has been provided by the Healthcare Foundation of New Jersey, New Jersey Sharing Network, Holy Name Medical Center in Teaneck, New Jersey, Valley Bank, the Russell Berry Foundation, Delta Dental of New Jersey, and by the Turrell Fund, supporting right from the start NJ. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.